Good morning, S3. Today we're just going to go through a few pages of your Response and Survival Pupil booklet. The PowerPoint I'm going to use should match up nicely with the booklet that you have to use. So we're going to look at why cells divide, the process of division, and the condition that is caused by uncontrollable cell growth. So the first part of the lesson is cell division. We're going to look at why cells divide. You could think about all the ways that babies might differ from adults as your starter for this section. So the first thing I ask you to do in your booklet is to draw an animal cell. Think back to S2. We have this squishy, wiggly blob, which is the animal cell. It has the nucleus in the middle, which controls all the cell's reactions. It contains the DNA, the alleles, genes, all these words that we've used in previous sections. We'll look at the process of how the nucleus divides today in this video, which is called mitosis. It has to happen for the cell as a whole can divide. We also have the cytoplasm in our diagram, which is where all the chemical reactions happen. We've got mitochondria, which we don't really talk about the function of those until the next key area, which is on respiration. And we've got the cell membrane, which controls what comes in and out of the cell. So once upon a time, you started life as a single fertilized egg cell. It was fertilized in what's called the fallopian tube or oviduct of your mother. It then moved down and implanted in the uterus. You've become quite different than when you were that single fertilized egg. You've specialized and you've grown into more than one cell. In order for us as multicellular organisms to grow, or for unicellular organisms, so things like bacteria that are only made up of one cell, they have to reproduce. And this has to be done from the existing cell. The process that unicellular organisms use to reproduce and that we as multicellulars use to grow is called cell division, and that's controlled by the cell's nucleus. So think about it. Why do you think your cells need to divide? If you want, you can pause the video and contemplate that for a couple of minutes. The answer to that question is for growth. So you started as one cell, you are now much bigger than one cell. But also to replace your worn out cells. Cells have a limited lifetime. After a while, they start making mistakes, they start getting damaged. And as a whole, the tissues and organs and systems of your body, they get damaged, they get old, they need replaced. Something like every 7 years, every cell in your body is replaced. In mature animals that have stopped growing, like myself, the main purpose of cell division is replacing cells and repairing tissues. So this is just a nice simple picture at the bottom of the page. We've got the animal cell, we've got the nucleus, that thing I said was really, really important, stores the chromosomes, decides what happens in the cell. It divides. This is the process that we call mitosis, and it happens before, you can see the nucleus divides to make two, and then the cell as a whole divides. That's very important because if the cell divided in two, but you still only had one nucleus, only one of the daughter cells, the cells formed, would have that nucleus. So you'd have to pick, and that wouldn't make much sense at all. In plant cells, it's the same process, but because they have a cell wall, it just looks a bit more fancy. So they go through this cell division, the nucleus divides, and then the cell as a whole divides. In this case, we need to put a cell wall down the middle. So we're going to look at some of the stages of that nuclear division that I called mitosis. The nucleus contains thread-like structures called chromosomes. You have 23 different types. You got 23, so chromosomes 1 to 23 from your mum, and you got chromosomes from 1 to 23 from your dad. They might have different forms of the gene, so both parents will have given you the hair color gene at the same part of a chromosome, but one of them might have given you the ginger gene, one of them might have given you the black hair gene, and your body has to decide which one of those is going to win. We've talked about that in the section on genetics. We've talked about dominance, and we've talked about recessive alleles. This is a sheet you have in the next page. I'm going to zoom in on each of these squares, the 6 squares in turn, and talk through what's happening to fill in the blanks. So in stage 1, the chromosomes are unwound in the nucleus. Each chromosome makes a copy of itself. The two copies of the chromosome stay joined together. So we'll see we'll see in this final slide here, there are single line. This chromosome is one single line. But in the first stage, it makes a copy of itself and it becomes this quite characteristic X shape. So that's two identical copies of that chromosome. So because these identical copies don't count as being their own little chromosome, they're joined together to make one chromosome, we still say there's only four. Even though if you really got into the nitty gritty of it, that is two things joined together. There's still only one chromosome. So we've got a chromosome here, chromosome there, chromosome there, chromosome there. They line up down the middle of the cell. Now, just like in the Earth, the middle bit going around the Mediterranean is the equator. That is the same in the cell. And just like in the Earth, the pointy bits at either side away from the equator are called the poles. So from these poles, thread-like structures that are called spindle fibers, but you don't need to know the word for that, they come out and they grab onto each of the identical copies of the chromosome that make up this X shape here, and here, and here. And they pull. They've gone out, and then like a grappling hook, they pull back to where they came from. That pulls each identical copy to a different side of the cell, to the nucleus, to different poles. And that means each pole, each side of this nucleus will have a full set of the 46 chromosomes. A nuclear membrane will then reform around the chromosomes, and the cell itself goes through cell division, so it starts to split into two. Two new cells are formed, each have 4 chromosomes in them. So we've got back to where we started. We had 4 chromosomes, we did identical copies, we lined them up at the equator of the nucleus, and then we split them so that each daughter cell can have a full set of chromosomes. And they're identical to that initial cell that we started with. So as I said, we have 23 types of chromosomes, and they're arranged in 2 matching sets, one from your mum, one from your dad. These flies that are called Drosophila, they only have 8 chromosomes, so 4 pairs. Sheep, 54 chromosomes, 27 pairs. Rabbits, 22 pairs of 44. Snails, 27 pairs of 54. Elephants have 28 pairs of chromosomes to make 56. Goldfish are pretty small. You probably imagine not a lot of chromosomes. Oh no, look at that. They've got 94 chromosomes. So the size of the organism doesn't really matter when you look at how many chromosomes it has. Each specific species that we've looked at had a different number of chromosomes. The sciencey word for that, and it's the last little bit I think you need to get into this section, is the chromosomal complement. It's the number of chromosomes that animal has. This is just a pretty picture of cell division and mitosis, and this is the same thing but on donuts. So you can see the copy, line up at the equator, the fiber things come out, pull them to opposite sides, the nuclear membranes form, and then you get new cells. We're going to quickly look at cancer. There's not any need to know information for this section, but if you want, it's very interesting to know how cancer is linked to cell division. You can have a little look. So you could Google in your own time what cancer is, what causes it, how it's linked to cell division, and if you're going to do that, please put down the references. I'd be very happy to have a look at that and mark it if you want to submit it to the assignment. Any pictures or data you have would be great. So cancer is caused by uncontrolled cell division. So cells are supposed to divide nicely and evenly, and when they're told to. If cells just divide randomly and don't listen to control signals, they become cancerous. Hopefully that allowed you to complete your booklet and made a bit of sense. Please do get in contact with me if you are struggling.